Hey, it's Greg here with maritimegardening.com, and I had some people asking me, what's the deal? Where did your wood chips go? And so I thought I'd do a short video explaining the change here in my garden. So the no-till approach to gardening, for most people that practice it, usually involves having areas in your garden that are beds and areas in your garden that are walking paths. And for the last X number of years, I have mulched the walking paths in my garden with wood chips that I get from a tree service. I have to pay, but I don't pay much. About $100 basically is enough for me to do my entire garden and some other spots. I have a walking path, that goes from my house to the garden. And they give me like maybe 6 cubic yards of wood chips. And that does the whole thing. Every year I get 6 cubic yards of wood chip. I bring it in and put it on all my walking paths. But this year, I started getting the idea of maybe using sand, which is what they call septic system sand. There's different grades of sand. This is the cheapest kind of sand you can buy. It's not as well screened. It's not as fine, but it's perfect for this sort of thing because it kind of sticks together like sandcastle sand, right? So it's the most aggregate form of sand you can get, I suppose. So what I did the last couple days, I had a young fella come and give me a hand. If you're getting old and you're finding gardening hard, pay a young person to help you. And if you want to motivate them to come help you, pay them a buck or two more than minimum wage, because in most places minimum wage is too low. Just imagine trying to live off of that. Anyway, so I paid a young guy to come help me for a couple days. I had 8 cubic yards of sand dumped in my driveway from a dump truck. And I had to move it all over here. And so if I hadn't had that guy help me, it would have taken me weeks. 47 over here. So anyway, I got thinking, what if I just put sand down? There's an area on my property where I had a sandbox I made for my kids, and I always noticed it never got any weeds. The weed seed lands in the sand. The sand's always dry. It just can't germinate. Even if it does germinate, as long as it's a few inches deep, the sand's got no real nutrients in it, so the plants are so weak, and the first hot day, the sand completely dries out and the plant just dies. So it's kind of weedless, so that makes it a good walking path mulch. It also doesn't break down. Right? The wood chips, you got to keep replacing them because they're always breaking down. So it's weedless. It's basically a desert. It doesn't break down because it's rocks, teeny tiny rocks. So those are the two things I've been thinking about for a number of years. I've been thinking along those lines. And then I just did a podcast, shameless promotion. I just did a podcast with Dr. Vet Lloyd from Mount Allison University. She's a biologist who studies ticks and Lyme disease and that sort of thing. And I'd always thought that if I mulched my gardens with wood chips, that the wood chips would, by having no grass in my garden, it'd be less ticky. But I've come to understand that that's not necessarily the case. Perhaps for adult ticks, I was probably doing a very good job of mitigating the risk of adult ticks having good habitat. But the juvenile ticks that are the size of a head of a pin, they are carried around by moles and voles, which I have in my garden. All kinds of tiny rodents. I got squirrels, moles, voles, birds, I got all kinds of small things that tiny ticks tend to latch onto. And they also like environments like dead leaves and wood chips and stuff like that because they like a moist environment. What Dr. Lloyd told me is that they have to have a moist environment or they dry out. So I decided turning my walking paths into a desert would be an environment ticks would not like at all, and she agreed with this approach. If you want to listen to that podcast, just go to www.maritimegardening.com. It's the most recent. If you're listening in the middle of May 2019, it's the most recent podcast, episode 81, I believe. I do a podcast every 2 weeks, an audio podcast. So I decided to bite the bullet. People are going to ask me about the cost. So the sand, it cost me for 8 cubic yards of sand, it cost me $425 to have the sand delivered. And then for the young guy, it cost me like $200. Oh, money well spent. So and that's a fairly large cash outlay, but if this works, I'll have sand here for forever. Maybe it'll, I don't know. We'll just have to see how it goes. I mean, I'm lucky I've got a YouTube channel and I get a bit of money from the YouTube channel, so I thought, why not do an experiment like this so that people that watch the videos and are concerned about ticks, and maybe they also don't like having to, it's not like bringing 6 cubic yards of wood chips into my garden every year was fun. I love the look of the wood chips, and I like it's just so earthy and woody, and the color of it, and it's nice to kneel on. It's just a wonderful thing. But at the risk of getting not just Lyme disease, but there's other tick-borne disease. I don't think there's any good tick-borne disease. It's not like a tick bites you and you get Spider-Man powers. I mean, every one of these things weakens you, saps your strength, and many of them stay with you for years. And depending on how promptly you treat some of those things, especially Lyme disease, the effects can be lasting and can affect your quality of life greatly. So yeah, to me it made sense, and it's also just worth taking a bit of the money I've made from YouTube to do this experiment, and people can watch it. My main concern is that so where my sandbox is, I put about 3 inches of crusher dust down first, and then I put about 3 or 4 inches of sand, actually more like 5 inches of sand on top of that. And it's perfectly flat, right? So that basically has been, I might spend 5 minutes a year. Sometimes around the edges a little bit of grass or dandelion will grow, but probably spend 5 minutes a year weeding it to keep it completely weed free. And it's a fairly large area. It's an area, sandy area, that is about 10 feet by 30 feet long, maybe 15 by 30. Now this is a larger area, but not much more sand. But it's over clay, right? I got basically sand and then clay, and clay doesn't accept rain very well. We had a really good rain last night. I'm going to take you around and show you how this looks now. It looks kind of cool, but we had a really good rain last night. I can always tell when there's a good rain by the level of water in my goldfish pond. And between yesterday and this morning, it's around 8 o'clock in the morning right now, the goldfish pond is a foot deeper than it was yesterday evening. So that's a lot of rain. We had a huge dump last night, and all the sand is still in place. It didn't run down. I mean, of course there can be more rain. You can have heavier rains, right? But there's a couple places where it's a bit soupy. So we'll just see how it all works. But if I have to get more, I'll get some more next year, I suppose, and pay another young guy help me out. But the other advantage of this, aside from not having to replace it being hopefully tick-proof or 99% tick-proof, and it being weedless and that sort of thing, is that what we noticed yesterday, it was a fairly sunny day yesterday. So we're going. I got all the sand in my driveway, which is about 100 yards away, and I got the garden here. We go from the driveway to the garden, and what we were noticing by the time this was about 3/4 done, it was hot back here. I mean, this space, think sand is rocks. And you remember when you go to a sandy beach on a really hot summer's day, it actually burns your feet, right? You need sandals to walk on sand because it gets so hot. And that seems to be what's happened here, where it's created, hopefully, a kind of microclimate where all of my walking paths are now a heat sink. Now, in some parts of the world, that's not desired because you got all the heat you could possibly want. And if you're down south somewhere, south of where I am, maybe too much heat's a problem. But where I am, there's only one problem. There's 2 problems: not enough sun, not enough heat. So I'll take all the heat I can get, and any way I can get it. And in a sense, you're basically turning all your walking paths into rocks, a big rocky walking path. So I'm really curious to see how this works, and I'm just hoping it doesn't all run away. But it seems to, as of last night anyway, there's no sign that it was running. So let me take you for a little walk around, okay? Not a garden tour, but kind of like a garden design tour, I guess. Maybe just 5 or 10 more minutes. All right, come on. All right, so here's the entrance. That's what it looks like, when you're walking in. Right, you got the sand everywhere. I've still got some things to finish at the back, and my garden's had a major redesign since last year. I had a bed going all along the fence, and now I've got these different beds. I think it uses the space better. But at the ends of the beds, I'm going to put just tiny little boxes. That way I can use that space a little bit, right? That way I can still reach in this way and I can still reach in that way. But I can grow something at the end of that. So I got to build those yet. Just one more little thing to do. The sand's about 3 inches deep here. It would be like 9 centimeters in metric. And it's probably 9 degrees Celsius right now. It's still a fairly cold morning. So my garden is 2,500 square feet. And I could say that the 8 cubic yards of sand pretty much did the job. You're always a bit conscious. It may have been better to add a little bit more and make it a little bit deeper, but I can tell you by the time we were done laying this all out, we were done with sand. That was all the sand we wanted. Well, we'll just see how it works and see how weedless it stays over the course of the season. But the prospect of having a slightly hotter than everywhere else microclimate in my yard, yeah, I'm really curious to see how this works. And I'm also curious to see how it affects different kinds of pests that I have in my garden. Perhaps slugs won't like going across the sand and they'll sort of just stay on the outer edge and they won't come in to the middle gardens. Perhaps snakes and toads will really like the heat of the sand, the layout on it in the mornings and stuff to warm up. I don't know. Just see. Or perhaps it was a huge mistake and a colossal waste of money. We'll see. The garden out here is still a bit of a work in progress. All these beds were built last year. I didn't have enough sand to finish this area off, but no big deal. And the new addition this year is putting these rock gardens. I don't know if I'll do them all the way down. They're kind of exhausting, especially when you're moving like 400 pounds rocks like that one. But they certainly look nice and they'll last a long time, that's for sure. Yeah, I think this is about as expanded as this garden's going to get. But anyway, yeah, that's what we did with the sand. And that's why I don't have wood chips. And I removed all the wood chips. I scraped them all off and I used them in my as a mulch in my front gardens, the ornamental gardens at the front of the house, and some walking paths and stuff like that. I just distributed them elsewhere on the property, and I put some of them on top of some of my garden beds. You can see, like for instance, this blueberry garden. I put some of the wood chips in here. It's a perennial garden. I threw them on top of some of the hay here. This is like strawberries and blueberries. And I threw some on with this garlic here, and I threw some on my strawberries over there. And this is asparagus garden here, and I actually expanded this garden, gave it this L shape because it just makes sense. Oh, I'm missing a rock over there, but I threw some on top of this strawberry garden. Anyway, I think that's about all I got to say about that. I'm really curious to see how this works. I'm very, very, very confident that it's a lot safer to be in here. I mean, when I'm working in my garden, I'm kneeling and sitting on the ground, and I would just hate for a tiny little tick the size of the head of a pin that you'd never notice, depending on where it goes on your body, getting under my clothing, or even more importantly, getting on one of my kids or my wife. That would just be a devastating thing to have happen, when it could have been, for me, blowing $600 to greatly reduce that risk is better than, the cost of contracting an illness like that, because it's far greater. Anyway, that's where we are with all that. I want to thank everyone for continuing to watch my channel, and we just yesterday or this morning, sometime between yesterday and this morning, I hit 1 million views. So I want to thank everybody for watching my show and sharing the videos and helping to make this successful. Certainly, if it wasn't for that level of success, I don't know that I would have laid out the money for this sort of thing. I don't know. It really depends on. I'm a pretty cheap guy. Certainly made it easier to make the decision to lay out a few $100 to do this. And if if you like the idea but you're a little apprehensive about how well it works, well, just watch my channel and see how it works over the next few years. My main concern, as I say, is maybe we get a lot of rain here. Like it's coastal on the Atlantic Ocean, and we get a lot of wind and a lot of rain. Main concern is a super duper duper rain just washing it all away, because the ground here is on a bit of a slope. If there was no slope here, I wouldn't be worried, but it's a slope, and we've got sand on clay. So if I were to do this again, if I had infinite time, resources, and money, I would put down like a crusher dust or a layer or something like that, gravel. But not just gravel. Putting gravel between walking paths, is if you want weeds, put gravel down. Even crusher dust, it's weedy. It just loves weeds. I don't know why weeds will grow in crusher dust. But I would put down some crusher dust and then put sand on top of it, a good 3 or 4 inches. Sand is weedless for the most part. I mean, there's some things that will get into it, of course, but that's the same thing with anything, wood chips or otherwise, right? But of all those mediums, sand is the most weedless medium. You're basically creating a desert, and then every one of your garden beds is an oasis. Apparently blackflies don't mind this desert at all, but you're creating a desert, and the garden boxes are the oasis in the desert. I'm curious to see how it works, and if you are, just keep watching my videos, and thank you for your viewership. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe, check out my podcast, maritimegardening.com, and until next time, get out there, get at it, have fun in your garden. Thanks for watching.